What happens if Disney can't agree with Comcast on a price tag for Hulu?
Tough.
I promise you it's already happened. That's
Well,
why they
yeah,
moved
they
this
went
up to
through
a 30.
arbitration already.
Yeah, they've already got a third-party analyst in there. Now, for those of you who watched the video that I did on Hulu a couple of 2 or 3 days ago, you saw me talk about some of the Wall Street analysts, the entertainment sector coverage analysts that we frequently cite here. You hear them on Disney earnings calls. You hear them on Warner Brothers earnings calls, Paramount, Comcast earnings calls. Guys like, from MoffettNathanson, guys from KeyBank, all these folks out there. What I found interesting was that a lot of these analysts were looking at this and trying to put a price tag or an EV, an enterprise value, on Hulu. And what they were coming up with was, quite frankly, relatively favorable to Disney. Now, of course, Brian Roberts, he wants Hulu to be valued at, $50-60 million, right?
Well, sure,
billion, right? He wants.
I want to sell my car for that amount too.
Right? Yeah, he wants Disney to pay $20 billion for this, and of course, Disney wants this to be towards the minimum side of the scale, which
9,
they
11,
agreed
12,
to.
somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's about $9 billion. So if the minimum valuation is at $27.5 billion, that means Disney would be on the hook to pay about $9 billion, or the 1/3 of it they don't own, back to Comcast. A lot of these analysts were coming up with figures that were not much higher than 27.5. There were several analysts that were putting the valuation, or the enterprise value, of Hulu at the $27 billion mark. They were putting it at the bare minimum of the contractual obligation. So Disney might be able to get out of this paying somewhere between, maybe, I think realistically it'll come in between 10 and 13 billion if, listen to me carefully, folks, if those analysts out there from KeyBank and MoffettNathanson and some of these other guys that I cited in that video a few days ago are correct. And these guys aren't dummies. The thing is that, like I said, Comcast wants this much, Disney wants to pay this much. Now they go to arbitration, as Pro said, where they have to bring in a third-party business valuation expert. It's a very special type of accountant. And their whole job is literally just to put a price tag on the value of a business, which is a very complex thing, especially a business of this scale. And of course, Comcast is going to hem and haw about how Disney didn't, put this up for international distribution years ago and all this kind of stuff. Well, there's a reason they didn't, obviously. Disney did not want to inflate the value of Hulu before they had to buy the rest of it. It's like, if we know we have a timer or a time bomb ticking on us right now, a financial time bomb, and we have to buy this thing in a couple of years, going back 2 or 3 years ago now when Comcast was complaining about this, they're not going to sit there and try to radically grow Hulu in the international markets and make it worth that much more to where they're going to raise the price tag. They're going to wait till they buy the rest of it, and then they're going to unleash the international markets. So get ready, folks, because 2024, Disney's going to be pushing Hulu globally like they are Disney Plus. That really hasn't been done yet. It's going to start.
So let's talk for a moment, though, about the argument that Comcast is making. Mm-hmm. Brian Roberts, of course, at the Goldman Sachs Communicopia and Technology Conference, he has stated that the way they believe that this should be evaluated is based on the amount of money that Netflix is allegedly worth. And then figuring out from that number, okay, how much is the second most lucrative streaming platform worth? And the second most lucrative platform is Hulu.
Right.
Hulu brings in the second largest subscription-based streaming services amount of money in terms of revenue. So what he's trying to do is walk this back from, okay, Netflix is valued at $200 billion. What percentage of a size of Netflix would Hulu represent? Okay, well, it's not even close, in terms of size, but whatever that percentage is sitting at, well, that should be the value of Hulu as well. And I don't know if that's a persuasive argument to the analysts who are looking at this and, figuring out that total for Disney to pay, but it's at least an argument that makes sense. I don't know. What do you think? Is that persuasive to you?
Not particularly. I have to go with the guys from MoffettNathanson and KeyBank on this, and they saw that argument. They were like, well, okay, we're trying to use Netflix as a comparative metric, but Netflix is Netflix. Netflix and Hulu
Being the leader has value.
Yeah, there are two different ballparks here, and they said, with that kind of EV, even if trying to remember how he put it, I think he said even if they put an enterprise value on Hulu of $40 billion, that would be way overvalued compared to Netflix's scale. So again, when I saw that many of these analysts kind of lining up with their valuations all coming in the mid to low $30 billion figures, and some of them even lower, close to the floor of $27 billion. I mean, there was 5 or 6 of them in the article that was mentioned that I covered in that video. I'm like, that's a lot. We didn't have anybody out there that came up with a $50 billion valuation. Nobody out there had that. So that's
Comcast wants it to land at like 70. I mean, that's what Comcast would ideally,
I don't think Comcast is going to get their way. I think.
So in the best of scenarios for Comcast, then you think that the high point is somewhere around $15 billion that Disney might have to pay to get that third, and that's optimistic for Comcast.
That's if they valued it at $45 billion. Yeah. I mean, what I was seeing was at 33 and 34. We were talking about 11, 12, maybe as high as $13 billion for Disney, and that's it.
So you think so fair enough. Do you think Iger and the Disney board would consider this a win then to walk away paying that amount, which is what they originally thought they were going to be on the hook for?
They could say when to have to pay it? What you mean?
No. A win as in, winning the game.
Oh, a win.
You think that
W-I-N.
Okay. Do you think Iger and his crew walk away from this claiming victory?
I think if Disney gets out of this paying, in that 10, 11, 12 billion dollar range, yeah. I think
so too.
Yeah. It's a win. I don't see how it isn't for them. I mean, now it's a win. It's a moral victory for sure, because they get to say, well, look, we knew what it was worth. We were right on the money when we set this up. Bang. Comcast gets a little more than the minimum. They get to save face. But it's still a new 10, 11, 12, $13 billion debt load that Disney takes on. Let's pretend for a minute they leverage all of it, right? Because they can't pay cash for this. Or they may structure this over the course of a year or two. I don't know how they're going to do it. They may float corporate bonds. They may issue a bunch of new stock, and who knows?
Oh, surely not. Surely not. Not at this point.
No, I don't think they would. But I mean, again, it's in the realm of possibility. I'm throwing out every possible thing that they could do, and that's kind of the kicker. But they put this out. I don't know if you saw this. This is the newest SEC filing from the Walt Disney Company. And again, this is your eyes will melt. I'm going to go through all this, but needless to say that this is talking about the agreement, how they're going to place a value on the EV for Hulu, the enterprise value of Hulu. And, talking about the negotiations that they have going in here with Comcast. And it goes back through the original stipulations from the purchase in Fox in May 2019, subsidiaries of Walt Disney, a subsidiary of NBC, collectively with its subsidiaries, blah, blah, blah. Hulu, 67% owned by Disney, 33% by NBCUniversal, subject to dilution under certain circumstances, yada, yada, yada. Hulu's fair equity floor value of $27.5 billion. If the put call is exercised in November of 2023, Hulu's equity fair value will be assessed as of September 30th. So
does that $27.5 billion, does it increase along with inflation, or is it a hard floor?
It's a fixed floor.
Okay.
It's a fixed number. Because this was renegotiated back in 2019 when the deal closed with Fox. So if the put call is exercised...
you think about inflation, that's actually, considering what happened in the last few years.
Right.
Not bad, Disney, on this one.
No, not bad. And I'm sorry, one of my monitors is glitching, and that's why it keeps flipping on and off. But here's where it says, in the event that the parties do not come to an agreement regarding equity fair value, each party appoints an investment banking firm to determine the value. If the two determinations are not within 10% of each other, then the two investment banking firms select a third firm to make a third determination. That's pretty much where
Comcast said it was worth $3 trillion. That was more than the 10% difference.
Yeah, I'd say so. So that's the way it works, folks. Everybody understands how this deal is gonna work. Disney has their firm, and let's say they used PricewaterhouseCoopers, who's been their auditor now for 7,000 years. And NBC Universal and their auditor is, I don't even know. I couldn't. It might be PricewaterhouseCoopers too, for all I know, but they would definitely not use the same firm as Disney. That would be a conflict of interest. So they have a firm. Disney has a firm. Those two firms come up with prices. Think about when y'all go buy a house, right? What do? You find a house, like, I want to buy this house. The house is listed at $250,000. You really want to pay $200,000. So you're going to go in there and you're going to say, I'll offer you $200,000. The seller says $250,000. You have to negotiate and come somewhere in the middle. This is the more complicated version of it, where think of these auditing firms and these valuation expert firms as kind of like the realtors in this case, negotiating back and forth. They won't be able to come to an agreement, right? The realtor for the seller wants to get the seller the most money possible, and the realtor for the buyer wants to get the buyer the lowest price possible. So that's the fight. If they don't, what's interesting here is then the two investment banking firms will select the third firm. So it's out of Comcast and Disney's hands. The two firms will then select somebody.
Right. And it's just like, at that point, it's like bringing in the home appraiser to come in and say, okay, here's what it's actually worth, and this is what you're going to sell it for, and they're going to buy it for.
Right. And it's investment.
They got to buy it.
Yeah. And it's investment banking firms. So I go back to, what did I say before? What did I talk about in the Hulu video a few days ago? Is that you've got investment banking firms like Moffett-Nathanson and KeyBank and all these other investment banking firms. What are they saying it's worth? What did I tell you? High 20s, low to mid $30 billion range. They're putting this towards the lower end of the range that favors Disney. I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of other investment firms out there that are going to see things terribly different. So even if it's more than 10% apart, which it probably will be, they will pick somebody else to come in and do it. So that's how this is going to go down. But in any case, I just wanted to kind of
we've leaked out before.